I'm Doug Sassy, and this is Do You Speak Story? Today we're going to look at the classic three-act story structure. Now, in order to best understand how to use the storytelling method, it's important to know how stories are structured. All great stories have a three-act structure: a beginning, a middle, and an end. But there's a bit more to it than that. Now, this structure has been around since Aristotle. It doesn't matter what kind of storytelling you do, whether it's screenplays or novels or whatever, the three-act structure provides you with the building blocks you need to create a story. This is the traditional three-act structure or paradigm. Let's look at it one piece at a time. Here's how it works. Act 1 sets up your story. It introduces the hero and main characters and their world, and it gives you the story's context, the who, what, when, where, or the exposition of the story. In Star Wars, we're introduced to the struggle between the evil Galactic Empire and the rebels. We also meet C-3PO and R2-D2, and finally the hero, Luke Skywalker. We're also introduced to Luke's drab, dull life. In the middle of Act 1, the inciting incident of our story occurs. This is the call to adventure. In Star Wars, Luke meets Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan plays Princess Leia's distress call, gives Luke a lightsaber, and tells him, "You must learn the ways of the Force if you're to come with me to Alderaan." Typically, the hero refuses the call to adventure because it's going to cause a great deal of conflict and danger in the hero's life. It's so much easier to avoid the unknown, go home, and watch TV. And Luke is especially reluctant because up until now, he's been looking for love in Alderaan places. But at the end of Act 1, plot point 1 occurs. And this is the event that drags the hero into the adventure and thus into the story. In this case, Luke returns home to find Imperial stormtroopers have killed his aunt and uncle. Now he has to accompany Obi-Wan to Alderaan. To summarize, Act 1 introduces you to the characters and their world, which provides you with the who, what, when, and where of the story. In other words, it provides context, and it also introduces the incident that begins the story. Which brings us to Act 2. This is where most of the story actually occurs. It's called the confrontation portion of the story because all of the action comes from conflict. The hero needs to achieve a goal that has obstacles prevent him or her from achieving it. Obstacles create conflict. The greater the need, the greater the obstacles. The greater the conflict, and therefore the greater the drama. Halfway through Act 2, we have the first culmination and the midpoint of the story. An event occurs in the story that makes it impossible for the hero to turn back. In Star Wars, the culmination and midpoint occur when Luke, Obi-Wan, Han, and Chewie have to blast off from Mos Eisley Spaceport to escape stormtroopers. The midpoint, the point of no return, occurs when a tractor beam drags their ship onto the Death Star. The midpoint also represents a major reversal of fortune for the hero and his or her friends. After the midpoint occurs, the stakes go up. The hero begins to take control and goes from reacting to taking action. The hero drives toward the ultimate goal, in this case, destroying the Death Star. In Star Wars, Luke helps rescue Princess Leia and escape the Death Star. But the antagonist or villain ratchets things up too. Act 2 ends with plot point number 2. Plot point number 2 is an event that occurs that makes it look like the villain might just win. Back to our story. Plot point number 2 occurs when Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan in a lightsaber duel. And although Luke and his friends make their escape, Luke has lost his mentor. To make things even worse, a homing beacon tracks the good guys to their secret rebel base. This is the low point of the story, or as UCLA screenwriting instructor Richard Walter calls it, the big gloom. Act 3 is the conclusion or resolution of the story. It's the final one-fourth of the story, and this is where the hero decides to come out of the big gloom that occurs at the end of Act 2 and do whatever it takes to overcome. The hero prepares for the final winner-take-all battle, and that battle occurs during the final culmination and leads to the climax. In Star Wars, Luke and the rebels attack and destroy the Death Star. They vanquish Darth Vader, until the next movie anyway, and they return triumphant to the rebel base. At this point, the tension has to come down in a part of the story called the aftermath. The aftermath has a satisfying scene that gives you a glimpse of the hero's possible future. In the final scene in Star Wars, we see the princess restored, and she honors Luke and Han in a medal ceremony. For some reason, the Wookiee doesn't get a medal or even a nomination for Wookiee of the Year. But that's the 3-act structure. I'm Doug Sassy. Thanks for watching.